Hi, my name's Caitlin. I'm making a short documentary film and I've got no idea what I'm doing. So in my last video, I framed out some general thoughts that I had about where to start as a beginner in making a film. And in this video, I really want to start thinking about storytelling and different narrative styles and how to tell but also show a story and let the audience witness what's happening. So I started to watch a few different documentaries in the past week. One was Andrea Gibson's story called Come See Me in the Good Light. Andrea Gibson was a poet who recently passed away, and the documentary follows sort of end of life care with their partner Meg, and it was really beautiful, stunning film, and I'll say more about that later, but I don't want to spoil anything. And then the other documentary that I watched was Ben Stiller's documentary about his parents, Anne Mira and Jerry Stiller, and it's called Nothing is Lost. And it was a story about having famous parents and also mirroring his own experience being a famous parent. And he and his sister sort of go through his parents' archives, and it was a really interesting way of storytelling, which I'll talk more about in a second. So the first thing I noticed about both of these films, and it feels very obvious for everybody else, I suppose, but that they have really apparent bookends and also an arc that leads to an event of some kind. So this is interesting because it got me thinking about my upstairs neighbors and what's the story here. Obviously, I've lived here for 3 years and I know a very small section of their life. And I'm like, yeah, I want to tell a story about love, but where is the arc in the story? What are the bookends? What are we working towards in terms of an hour film? And it's funny because my partner said the very obvious thing when I was stumped about not knowing what those things were, is to just interview them and find out. So I'm glad I have people around me that I can talk to as I move through this process. What I liked about Andrea Gibson's film was the very last event that the story was leading to wasn't their death, but the last performance that they could give to an audience before they passed. And so you see them sort of practicing and trying to remember all their poems and so they could bring that to the stage for the very last time. And although it was a very heavy topic, it felt very light and hopeful and more about the beauty of being alive than the fear of dying. So knowing that they had already passed away, it was very bittersweet and sort of hauntingly beautiful at the same time. For Ben Stiller's film, we begin with the apartment of their parents. He and his sister need to sell. So it's full of decades of belongings, and they're going through it and they're filming it, and they're going through old letters and archival footage and photos, and in a way those things tell the story because we're witnessing old interviews, we're on the Ed Sullivan show, and letters to each other, so it kind of describes the love that they had for each other in their own words, even though they've passed away. So it was a really interesting tool to tell a story. And there were also some talking head videos within that. Ben Stiller's interviewing his family members and his kids and his wife and his sister. And it was very fun and lighthearted. But then you could also see the struggles of growing up in a famous family. And then also Ben Stiller repeating those errors that he believed that his parents had made. And so we open there and then we close on selling the apartment, or having an empty apartment that's ready to be staged and sold. So I really enjoyed that as well. So back to the interviews to find out what the story is. When I was doing my master's degree, the pandemic had hit, so I didn't really get to do any interviews as part of my thesis. So I'm excited to do this. It's sort of making up for old times. And I want to bring some of the theories of participatory research into that as well, because I think that's really important, that the participants have control over what is produced. And I follow this organization called The Voice of Witness, and they describe themselves as community-based oral history, storytelling, and education that advances human rights by amplifying the voices of people impacted by and fighting against injustice through oral history, education, and advocacy. And they have a lot of good resources and workshops that I'm excited to sift through. I'm also attending a workshop next week called Storytelling in Practice films and podcasts as liberation, and this is led by Kristal Sotomayor, who talks about the intersections of oral history, journalism, and filmmaking as acts of community and liberation, which I love and I'm super excited to learn more about. I'll also link that below in case any of my 13 followers are interested. Through that same organization, I also bought a book called Say It Forward, A Guide to Social Justice Storytelling. And I bought this from Haymarket Books, which is a radical independent nonprofit book publisher based in Chicago. And they also have 40% off right now. So they've got really interesting titles that I also used throughout my thesis. So I would highly recommend. So in my next video, I'm thinking I'm going to start mapping out what questions are good to ask in an interview and how to approach that ethically with sort of trauma-informed interviewing skills that I'll learn from Voice of Witness as well, because I think that's really important. There are a lot of tough topics I imagine we are going to touch on, so I want to be as prepared for that as possible. So I'm sort of using this behind the scenes filming as practice for filming and sound and all the things. And I want to take a moment to talk about what I've learned from the first video that I posted, so I can be sure not to make the same little errors again. So I think first and foremost is just doing any talking headshot in one long shot and then editing from there. Maybe I got a little excited to see the videos. And obviously there wasn't a lot of continuity with my setup. And also the day, so they were shot on different days. I just wore the same clothes, but that was pretty obvious. And also the sound wasn't very good. I think I had a microphone, but I think something happened when I imported the video into the editing platform that I'm using, which is DaVinci Resolve. So I need to figure out what happened there. I know there's some techniques that you can use to sort of normalize the audio once it's in DaVinci. But today I don't have the microphone on, so we'll see. And then secondly, in thinking about oral history storytelling and participatory approaches to it, I want to be really certain that I'm not projecting my own perspective as much as possible. I think, it'll be impossible not to do it at all, but really allowing for the participants to use their own words to describe their worlds. And I think I noticed in the first video, I presented my neighbors as a queer couple, and they're two women in a relationship for 20 plus years, but then I realized they probably don't identify as queer, or I actually don't know how they both identify. I know that one of them always makes the joke, "I'm not gay, my girlfriend is." And it's a funny little quip, but I need to dig into that a bit more and not project my own thoughts of identity onto other people. So that's something I just wanted to catch myself on there. And that's all I've got. So yeah, I'll let you know how the workshop goes and the other event, which was the video consortium, which is on the same day actually. So it'll be a fun video filled day. Thanks for watching. Bye.